The courtroom was silent when the gavel fell. 60 years. That's how long Ryan Hale was sentenced to spend behind bars for a crime he swore he didn't commit. Judge Malcolm Brewer didn't flinch when he handed down that sentence. But weeks later, while reviewing an unrelated case, he stumbled on a piece of evidence so shocking, it unraveled everything he thought he knew about justice. And when he decided to expose the truth, it didn't just destroy careers. It revealed a web of corruption that reached deeper than anyone imagined. If you've ever been underestimated, if you ever felt powerless against a system that refused to listen, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready. Because this is one of the most heartbreaking and satisfying justice stories you'll ever hear. It was a scorching summer afternoon in Fresno, California. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and stress. Judge Malcolm Brewer, 62, had presided over hundreds of cases in his 35-year career. He was known for being unyielding, precise, and utterly unshakable. To him, justice wasn't emotional. It was procedural, cold, clear-cut. That day, sitting across from him, stood Ryan Hale, a 24-year-old mechanic with nervous eyes and a jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. He'd been convicted of armed robbery, a jewelry store heist that left one man critically injured. The evidence seemed airtight: a surveillance clip, a gun with his fingerprints, an anonymous tip, and a storage unit filled with stolen jewelry under his name. The prosecution painted Ryan as a calculating criminal, but when he took the stand, his voice cracked with disbelief. "I didn't do this. I wasn't even near that store." His mother, sitting in the back row, wept into her hands. The defense lawyer's arguments were weak, hesitant, more out of obligation than belief. And when the jury returned with a guilty verdict in under 3 hours, the courtroom felt heavy with finality. Judge Brewer cleared his throat, his voice echoing through the room. "You stand convicted by a jury of your peers. I hereby sentence you to 60 years in state prison." The gavel struck. Ryan didn't cry, he didn't shout, he just turned once to meet his mother's tearful gaze before being led away in shackles. To everyone else, it was justice served. But for Ryan Hale, it was the end of his world. That night, Judge Brewer sat alone in his chambers. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. He stared into his cup of black coffee, bitter, cooling, and told himself he'd done the right thing. That's what the evidence said. That's what the law demanded. But somewhere deep inside, something didn't sit right. A flicker of doubt he quickly dismissed. After all, doubt had no place in a courtroom. Weeks passed. The Hale case faded into headlines and archives. Until one night, Brewer was reviewing files for an upcoming case involving police misconduct. He wasn't expecting anything unusual. But then, one name stopped him cold: Ryan Hale. At first, he thought it was a coincidence. But as he flipped through the documents, his pulse quickened. There it was, a gun listed in an evidence log from another robbery that happened around the same time as Ryan's case. The description matched exactly the weapon used in the jewelry store heist. Same make, same scratches on the barrel. But here's the kicker. That gun had been seized 2 days after the jewelry store robbery, during a completely different arrest. Brewer's breath caught in his throat. If that gun was already in police custody, how could it have been used in the robbery that put Ryan Hale behind bars? He stayed up all night cross-referencing reports, serial numbers, and evidence tags. And the deeper he dug, the worse it got. The detective who handled both cases? The same man, Detective Calvin Lewis, the star witness for the prosecution. And the anonymous tip that had led to Ryan's arrest, the phone number traced back to a burner registered under Lewis's own name. Brewer's stomach turned. For the first time in his long career, the system he devoted his life to looked like a lie. He reached out to Dan Hayes, a retired investigator known for sniffing out dirty cops. They met at a diner off Highway 99, the kind of place where secrets stayed buried under the clatter of coffee cups. "Dan," Brewer said quietly, sliding the file across the table, "I think I sentenced an innocent man." Hayes flipped through the papers, eyes narrowing. "If what you're saying is true," he muttered, "someone went to great lengths to bury this." Together they dug deeper, combing through police records, old witness statements, and internal memos. One witness, a store clerk, confessed tearfully when confronted. "Detective Lewis told me to say it was Ryan, said if I didn't, I'd get charged too." Piece by piece, the truth unraveled. Lewis had fabricated the tip, planted the fingerprints, and falsified the evidence, all to cover his own tracks. Then came the smoking gun, an email recovered from Lewis's deleted police account detailing exactly how he had manipulated the case to guarantee a conviction. Brewer's hands trembled as he read it. Everything he'd built his career on, every sentence he had ever passed, now felt poisoned. "We have to go public," Brewer said, "even if it costs me everything." The fallout was instant. The motion to reopen Ryan's case hit the courthouse like a thunderclap. News headlines exploded. "Judge accuses detective of framing convict in high-profile case." Some called him a hero, others a traitor. He received anonymous calls in the middle of the night, heavy breathing, then silence. One morning he found his car tires slashed and a note on the windshield, "Drop it or else." But he didn't back down. He couldn't. Weeks later, the new hearing began. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, activists, and curious onlookers who wanted to see how far the corruption went. Brewer sat quietly in the back as the new judge played the surveillance footage uncovered by Hayes, footage that's somehow gone missing during Ryan's original trial. Gasps filled the room. There on the screen was Detective Lewis, leaving the jewelry store with a duffel bag full of stolen goods. The judge turned toward the gallery, his face ashen. Lewis sat stone-faced beside his lawyer, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. Brewer rose to his feet. "This," he said steadily, "is the man who led the investigation, the man who fabricated evidence to send an innocent young man to prison." The courtroom erupted, reporters shouting, cameras flashing. Lewis was handcuffed on the spot. As he was led past Brewer, he hissed under his breath, "You don't know what you've started." But Brewer did know what he'd started. He'd started the only thing that still mattered, the truth. Weeks later, the retrial concluded. Ryan Hale, thinner and pale from his time behind bars, stood in the same courtroom where he'd once been condemned. Only this time, the mood was different. Hope buzzed faintly in the air. The presiding judge took a deep breath and announced the decision. "The conviction of Ryan Hale is hereby overturned." Ryan's mother let out a sob, the kind that comes from years of pain finally breaking loose. Ryan turned to her, smiling through tears as applause filled the room. From the back row, Brewer sat silently, emotion welling in his chest. For once, the gavel had fallen on the side of truth. But victory came at a cost. Detective Lewis faced criminal charges. A full investigation exposed a culture of corruption within the Fresno Police Department, one that had been festering for years. Judge Brewer, once the system's most loyal servant, became its most relentless critic. He turned his courtroom into a platform for reform, refusing to sign another sentence without absolute proof. As for Ryan, he didn't vanish into bitterness. Instead, he started working with advocacy groups for the wrongfully convicted, helping others reclaim their lives. When asked how he forgave the system that stole years from him, he said simply, "Because someone finally listened." The story of Ryan Hale and Judge Brewer isn't just about corruption. It's about conscience. About what happens when one man decides to stand up even when the cost is everything he's ever built. Because sometimes the real fight for justice doesn't end with a gavel. It begins with the courage to say, "We got it wrong."